She turned her head slowly, without urgency, but as if something had already entered her skin. The stars behind her didn't blink, they just watched. No sound, no signal. Just the sense that something vast was present, just outside the edge of the visible. She floated in the dark, her visor reflecting nothing. But her breath grew shallow. Like she knew. Something was behind us. Earth drifted silently in the background, framed in blues and pale gold. Its oceans pulsed faintly under the clouds. And behind it, something else. Not a ship, not a shadow, but a kind of gravitational bruise, a curvature in the black, as if the void had memory. As if something enormous had passed this way and never quite left. There were no engines. No signature. Only the echo of motion without mass. Astronomers called it dust, debris, residual reflection. But it moved too precisely, too gently, as though it were waiting for us to realize it had always been there. And NSHE tilted her head again, not with fear, but the way an animal listens to wind it cannot locate. Something behind Earth. Following, not approaching, not chasing, just there. Fixed to our path like a second silence. This was not a discovery. This was a noticing. Somewhere between the Earth and Moon, in the deep folds of gravitational stillness, a presence lingers. Not a planet. Not a body. A structure without structure. A shape made of almost nothing. Invisible unless touched by polarized light, barely distinguishable from the absence it swims within. NNFOR decades, it was a rumor among instruments. The ghost companion. The silent sibling. The cloud that shouldn't be there, and yet never fully left. And now it's clearer. Not more visible, but more real. More certain in its refusal to be explained. NNSHE breathed out. Slow. The stars did not answer. But something, just outside the lens, shifted, like a ripple in vacuum. This is the story of that ripple. The thing behind us. NNOT. A monster. Not a message. Just a gravitational truth that followed Earth, like a thought we forgot to finish. Maybe. It's not following at all. Maybe it's waiting. I used to think space was silent in a clean way, as if silence meant nothingness, an empty room between stars. But silence can have texture, shape, weight. Some silences aren't voids at all. They're presence unspoken. Like the pause before someone says your name. Or the stillness in a room just after a lie. That's what this is. Not emptiness behind Earth, but a silence that leans forward. A presence that doesn't interrupt, but waits for you to notice. NNSHE floated between satellites and orbiting wreckage, fingers grazing the edges of a panel not meant to be touched. Her visor mirrored the Earth below, but her eyes stayed locked on something behind it. Not on any one point, but on the corridor between planets, where gravity folds time into delicate balances. That's where it hides. In the perfect stillness between poles being, there are 5 points in the Earth-Moon system where gravity cancels itself out. Places where objects can float, unmoving, not because they're at rest, but because they're caught in an exact equation of forces. The Lagrange points. At 2 of them, L4 and L5, the pull of Earth and Moon creates a cradle, a place where even dust can fall asleep and not drift. Astronomers always knew these points mattered. They launched probes there, placed telescopes in their arms. But some saw more, blurred patches, shifting clouds that shouldn't exist. NNFOR 60 years, the debate circled like debris. Some said it was an illusion. Others said it was real but irrelevant. A cloud of nothing, trapped by gravity. But a few noticed something stranger. The way the dust behaved. Not random, not chaotic, but rhythmic, cohesive. Like memory, NNSHE reached her hand toward the darkness beyond the curve of the Earth. Not to grab, just to feel. The vacuum didn't respond, but in her helmet, the pressure changed. Slightly, like being watched from a great distance. Not a face, not an eye, but the feeling that something is paying attention. One cloud in particular, near the L5 point, refused to vanish. It reappeared in new surveys. It matched simulations. It scattered polarized light in precise, traceable ways. Not just a floating accident. A presence, composed of dust, yes, but also of duration. Of time suspended in repetition. And scientists named it after the man who first noticed it, Kordylewski. But naming it didn't make it less strange. You don't name ghosts to understand them. You name them to admit they're staying. What if it's not just dust? What if it's a slow recording? A cosmic loop? A structure left not to act, but to reflect? Like a mirror left hanging in a hallway long after the person who placed it is gone. NNSHE floated through telemetry fields, scanning coordinates, her breath slow. Around her, Earth turned quietly. Sunlight touched the curve of the Pacific, but her focus stayed behind it. On the unseen twin, NN, this cloud doesn't orbit like a moon. It doesn't pull tides, it doesn't cast shadows, but it moves with us. Locked in step, a massive echo. 9 times the width of Earth, but so diffuse, it's nearly undetectable. Like breath on cold glass. Present. Real. But only if the light hits it right. NNTHE, more we looked, the more it shimmered. Not with light, but with uncertainty. Instruments caught flickers, shapes, then nothing, then shapes again. It refused to settle into data, as if it didn't want to be known, only noticed. And still, it's there. Following. Or maybe guiding. Or maybe just existing in parallel. A cloud-shaped reminder that not everything in space moves alone. NNSHE blinked. Not in fear. In recognition. As if remembering something that hadn't happened yet. There is something behind Earth. It does not want us. It does not harm us. It does not need us to believe in it. It only needs us to look back. And once you look, you can't quite forget the shape it leaves on the edge of your thoughts. Every object in space has a story. Not one written in language, but in mass, inertia, and orbital decay. Most of those stories are simple. A body pulled, a path followed, a fall interrupted. But this one doesn't follow. It lingers, moves with us, but not because it must. It moves like a decision already made. NSHE drifted above the Terminator line, that strange seam where night and day kiss across the Earth's surface. Her face was lit from one side, shadowed on the other. That duality of knowing and not knowing reflected in her motion. As if her body already understood what her mind had not caught up to, and NTHE dust cloud near the L5 point is not a solid, it's not even dense. It's made of particles smaller than cells, micron-scale fragments, each so light that a single breath on Earth would scatter them across a room. And yet, in space, they gather, held not by structure, but by resonance, like notes in a chord that refuses to resolve. They don't reflect light like glass, they scatter it, and only if the angle is perfect. That's why we didn't see them at first. Not because they were hidden, but because we were looking wrong. Polarized imaging, the technique that finally revealed them, doesn't show what's there. It shows how things tremble under the weight of light. It shows behavior, not form. NNSHE watched that trembling on her display. Faint pulses in a field of static. Not enough to prove, but enough to feel. Like listening to the ocean in a shell, nothing measurable, yet undeniably present. NNTHE scientists, who tracked the cloud, used simulations. They calculated the movement of nearly 2 million particles, releasing them into modeled space to see what would hold, what would drift, what would disappear. Most particles escaped. But some stayed. Some formed clusters, patterns. A shape like breath exhaled and never recalled. And that shape, unstable, yes, but persistent, kept appearing. Not always in the same place, but always in the same dance. Fading. Returning. Fading again. A ghost moon. A gravitational mirage. A memory with mass NNSHE rotated slowly, adjusting her position, sensors extended like hands in the dark. She wasn't searching for proof. She was listening for rhythm. There's a reason this cloud survives. L5 is one of only 2 stable Lagrange points in the Earth-Moon system. Unlike L1 through L3, which are like balancing a pencil on its tip, L4 and L5 are more like bowls. Objects fall into them, not down, but around. They swirl, they echo. They find equilibrium not in stillness, but in motion. It's the most delicate kind of stability. One that tolerates imperfection. One that lives through adjustment. And maybe that's the point. Maybe this isn't a structure in spite of chaos, but because of it. NNSHE breathed in slowly, eyes tracing telemetry arcs. On her screen, the data moved like water, not in lines, but in waves. When we think of moons, we think of spheres, solidity, bodies. But the universe is not bound to our preferences. A moon can be a structure, a field, a phenomenon. And if we define it not by mass but by presence, then the Kordylewski cloud qualifies. It is there. It is consistent. It moves with us. It responds to forces. It reflects light. It has no center, but it has intention. And in 2018, new observations confirmed it again. This time not in speculation but in precision. The cloud scattered polarized light exactly as predicted. Its shape matched the models. Its brightness correlated. Its mass, still nearly unmeasurable, was mapped through the echo of its behavior. We couldn't touch it, but we could predict how it would resist the wind. NNSHE ran her hand along the edge of the console. Not to activate, just to stay grounded. Outside, nothing moved. But inside the instruments, everything pulsed. There's a paradox here. Something this huge, nearly 9 times the diameter of Earth, made of particles smaller than bacteria, composed of matter less dense than smoke, and yet it survives. Not as a fluke, but as a system. Not despite physics, but through it. It is not a mystery because it is strange. It is a mystery because it is precise. NNSHE looked up again. Her visor reflected the stars. And somewhere beyond the frame, the cloud waited, not moving. Just continuing. This is not a moon. It's a persistence. We talk about space as if it's stable, as if the laws we've written onto the cosmos will obey our ink. But what if they don't? What if something has already shifted, and we're only just noticing the delay? NNSHE hovered above Earth's horizon, the planet's curve slicing her field of view like a blade. The light was dimmer now, as if the sun had pulled just slightly away, reluctant to illuminate the edges. Her fingers hovered over nothing. Stillness in her limbs, but not in her thoughts. An NTHE Kordylewski cloud was always described as an echo, an atmospheric trick, a dust-borne accident of gravity. But recent simulations suggest more, that its shape isn't constant, that it pulses, shifts, expands and contracts not randomly, but rhythmically with the orbit of the moon, as if it's breathing with us. NNN, that's the fracture, that's the place where the model cracks. Because if a structure can change in time with its parent bodies, then it isn't just reacting, it's synchronizing. NNSHE adjusted her trajectory slightly, stabilizers silent. The Earth slid sideways across her helmet. No alarms, no signs of danger. And yet, her breath had changed. Shallower, slower. A delay, almost imperceptible, but building NNIF, the dust, responds to the moon's position. Then we are not just seeing trapped particles, we are witnessing feedback. The same kind of feedback that stabilizes weather systems or neural networks. A recursive loop between force and reaction. NNA structure that lives in delay. NNN, and then the question gets stranger. What if this isn't just a cloud responding to Earth and Moon, but a kind of reflection? Not in light, but in motion. A mimicking. A shadow dance. NNSHE blinked. Behind her, nothing moved. And yet, something adjusted in her bones. As if gravity itself had whispered, NNWE assume the solar system is built on hierarchy. The sun controls the planets control the moons. But Lagrange points don't work like that. They're democratic. They exist not because of power, but because of balance. Equal pull. Equal release. And so the L5 cloud doesn't orbit Earth. It orbits balance. It lives where forces cancel, not where they dominate. That's why it's invisible. Not because it hides, but because we look for authority, not equilibrium. NNSHE looked again at the telemetry. The patterns had changed. Not randomly, but like language. A pattern inside a pattern. Self-correcting, self-preserving. And in 1991, the Japanese Hidden probe passed through the L5 region. Its instruments were ready. Its mission was precise. And it found nothing. No dust, no particles, no signature. NNBUT simulations today suggest a reason. The dust was there, but too slow, too quiet, too fine to be caught by detectors built for impact. The presence was not wrong. The tools were, like trying to hear a whisper through a storm. NNSHE touched the inside of her helmet, the motion gentle, almost unconscious. Outside, the cloud stretched invisibly across 100,000 kilometers. It was there. It had always been there. We just needed to listen differently. What if this cloud is not following Earth? What if Earth is dragging it? Not like a leash, but like memory. Like every action leaves a residue. What if this structure is the wake of our orbit? A gravitational afterimage. Not a companion, but a scar. And yet, it persists. Not just as dust, but as signal. As evidence that movement is never without consequence. NNSHE closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, the stars had not shifted, but something in her perception had. And this is the turn. The moment the ghost becomes not just real, but integral, NNWE thought we were alone in our path. But maybe we've always been followed, not by an object, but by the shape of our own inertia. We always think the body ends at the skin, that beyond it is otherness. Air, vacuum, world. But what if there's no such border? What if motion extends us? What if part of you is still traveling, just behind your feet, just beyond your touch, dragged by what you once were? NNSHE floated in the quiet loop of orbit, her hands open at her sides, palms facing the stars. Not reaching, just listening. Her face was calm now, no longer searching for anomalies. There was something devotional in her stillness, like she had accepted that presence does not need a name to be felt. NNTHE Kordylewski cloud isn't a body. It isn't even a collection. It's a persistence of motion. A collective stammer of dust that doesn't scatter. A region where particles hang in suspension, not by choice, not by resistance, but by synchrony. Like they remember where they're supposed to be. There's something profoundly human about that. Not the science, but the echo. The idea that matter can hesitate. That debris can organize into memory. Some of the dust is thought to come from lunar ejecta, fragments launched from the moon's surface by impacts, flung into the shared dance of Earth and Moon and trapped at L5. Other particles are interplanetary, cosmic silt floating into our system, only to get tangled in the choreography of forces. Nothing in the cloud is permanent. It loses dust as easily as it gains. But the structure, the rhythm, it endures. NSHE passed through shadow. Sunlight fell away from her visor. In that darkness, the instruments glowed pale blue. Their data points lit up across her forearm, one by one. Each signal was weak, insufficient, but together, they drew shape. A slow constellation. This isn't how we usually talk about science, but maybe it should be. We want clarity, proof. But the universe gives us resonance, scatter, suggestion. We keep searching for particles, but maybe we should be listening for choreography. NNTHE cloud is not visible to the naked eye, not even to most telescopes. It must be studied through the scattering of polarized light, photons deflected at precise angles, like reflections on the surface of moving water. Not the water itself, but the way it warps what's beneath. NNSHE watched those warps now, simulations overlaid with sensor data. The cloud pulsed in hues not visible to her eyes, but interpreted through spectral filters, reds that weren't red, frequencies too slow to be color, too fast to be noise. In that dance, she saw motion without body, like the way grief lingers after the sound of the door closing. And still, it followed Earth, not obediently, not passively, but with the slow insistence of structure. Some theories suggest the cloud isn't a leftover at all, that it may be constantly replenished by micrometeoroid collisions and the slow leak of matter from deeper space, that it isn't a memory, but a system, an living equilibrium. NNSHE tilted slightly. Her position shifted by centimeters, but her body felt the ripple like a current. The instruments confirmed it. Microperturbations in the field. Dust, almost certainly, but not random, not chaotic. There was rhythm in the interference. NNIF. You zoomed out far enough, the Earth-Moon system wouldn't look like a pair of bodies. It would look like a braid, a shared orbit, bound not by mass but by motion. And in that braid, these Lagrange points emerge like still eyes in the storm. And maybe that's where the truth lives now, not in the dust, but in the fact that dust can organize itself in silence. NNSHE closed her eyes, not from fatigue, but from reverence. She knew this was not the kind of discovery that made headlines. This was not a collision, not a flare. This was an accumulation of absence, a shape in the background that had always been waiting for someone to stop and watch it form. NNWE think of dust as dead, inert, proof of decay. But this dust moves. It balances. It corrects. It holds position not out of strength, but from precision. It does not need to speak. Its silence is already fluent. And, as she drifted further, the signal held. Not stronger, just more certain. There is a shape behind Earth. It is not new. It is not lost. It is the consequence of being in motion. And maybe that's all we ever are. Organized trails of what we used to be, momentarily stable before dissolving again. It started as a curiosity, a whisper in the data. Then it became a presence, a shape that refused to disappear. But now, it feels different, not like an anomaly. More like a memory I never lived. NNSHE moved through the orbital corridor slowly, as if any sudden motion might disturb the balance. Around her, nothing. But in the patterns of her instruments, in the soft calibration hum, something was listening back. Not a voice, not a call. Just the echo of coherence. .NN. You could fill a notebook with numbers here. The Kordylewski cloud spans over 100,000 kilometers in length, nearly 70,000 wide. But its mass, almost negligible, dust grains between 1 and 10 microns across, smaller than most bacteria. And yet, when they cluster, when they hold their positions, they create a structure more enduring than many satellites. Not through strength. Through alignment in yin. It's hard to explain the intimacy of that. That something so slight, so scattered, can still exist through rhythm. The way a heart does. NNSHE turned her head. And for a moment, there was nothing in her visor but curve. Not of Earth, not of the cloud, but of her own trajectory. Her breath fogged slightly on the interior of the glass. A human detail, transient and warm. NNTHE scientists who tracked the cloud had to invent new ways to see it. Not by observing the dust directly, but by detecting how it manipulated polarized light. How the photons bent and twisted in response to invisible fields. Like watching smoke shape a beam of sun through a cracked window, and what they saw, it wasn't static. The cloud pulsed, changed density. Its outer edges blurred and then reformed, as if it wasn't a place but a breath held between gravitational muscles. NNSHE reached out, again not to touch, but to acknowledge. The data didn't spike, but her body did. A surge of awareness, of being inside something unnameable. What if this cloud is not just with us, but about us? Not in the anthropocentric way, not as evidence of purpose, but as a reflection, an imprint of orbital intention, Na di den kaite, did kiss din kites f, n awetf. You imagine Earth's path through space. It isn't a circle. It's a spiral, carved by the sun's motion through the galaxy. And the cloud, this delicate structure, follows that spiral like wake behind a ship, not because it chooses, but because it must. And still, it isn't passive. There are moments when the dust thickens, when it scatters light more sharply, when interference patterns intensify. Some suggest this is due to solar wind variation. Others say lunar gravity. But maybe it's neither. Maybe it's a kind of attention, a focusing, the way a forest hushes when something unseen moves through it. SHE drifted forward, just a few meters. The silence grew louder. THE cloud has no core, no boundary. It can't be mapped the way we map planets, but we can trace its impact on radiation, on local fields, even on certain satellites. And it's this contradiction that lingers. How can something so empty, so unanchored, cause such interference? Because it's not interfering. It's participating. SHE blinked slowly. Her oxygen levels were stable, but her heartbeat had quickened, not from fear, from recognition. This cloud, it was never other. It was always part of the system, the overlooked organ in a machine we thought we fully understood. Some speculate that similar clouds could exist around other planetary systems, that Lagrange points across the galaxy might host these ephemeral cousins, structures born not from matter but from patience, from repetition, and suddenly the idea of solitude in space seems naive. SHE exhaled, watching the condensation disappear. Then she smiled. Small, almost involuntary. Like someone realizing they've been watched their whole life, but not by a stranger, by the past. THE cloud doesn't tell us where to go. It tells us where we've been. It holds the dust of every journey, every impact, every fragment ejected from our shared gravity. And in that dust, something is organized. Not mechanically, not randomly, but emotionally. NOT, because it wants to, but because it can't help it. And maybe that's the most human thing in the universe. Not Mati closed her eyes. There was no reason to keep them open. What mattered now wasn't visible. It was felt. The rhythm of orbits, the breath of dust, the structure of what remains when movement becomes memory. NNIF. You follow Earth far enough, past the moon, past its history, past even its name, you find the cloud. Not behind, not above, just there, waiting in a body made not of presence, but of aftermath. And still, it holds. The final image isn't an explosion, it isn't discovery, it's not even light. It's delay. A softness. A structure that didn't arrive, because it never left. NNSHE stood inside the capsule, weightless, watching her own reflection in the blackened screen. But it wasn't her face she noticed. It was the silence behind it. The stillness between pulses, that place where motion used to be. There are moments in cosmology where the known dissolves, not into ignorance, but into intimacy. The realization that not all presence is forward-facing, that some companions never speak, they just remain. And the Kordylewski cloud, it doesn't orbit us. It doesn't react to us. It carries us. Like a scar you stopped noticing. Like a second heartbeat, just out of sync. NNWE mapped it, measured it, simulated it. But none of that describes what it means, because this isn't about dust. It's about time. What if this cloud isn't following us? What if it's us, just delayed? NNSHE floated in the dark, no longer scanning, no longer waiting, just breathing in the truth that something vast had moved with us through space. Not like a shadow, but like a continuation. Like a sentence trailing behind a speaker who forgot they were still speaking. And there's a wordless question inside the cloud. Not, what is it? NBUT. Why did we need it to be something? Sometimes the universe doesn't answer with form. Sometimes it answers with rhythm. And the rhythm of this cloud, it isn't the rhythm of matter. It's the rhythm of residue, of what can't be left behind. And Nin, you are not just here. You are also what follows behind you. You are the wake of your own orbit. The gravity you forget you carry. NNSHE touched the wall of the capsule gently, not to steady herself, to say thank you, because in the dust she saw it clearly now. There was no threat, no intelligence, no design, only a shape that echoed every turn we've taken. And it leaves one question behind. What if the universe doesn't forget where we've been, just because we do? And what if every orbit leaves a ghost, and we're just learning to see them?